All right, today we're going to look at section 3.2 in our workbooks, which starts on page 62 with a quick little warm-up. And we're just going to actually look at two questions in our warm-up that are specifically important for today's work, and that's going to be number 1 and number 4. So in number 1, we're going to start by doing some simple multiplying by 10 and dividing by 10. And we've had lots of practice in doing this recently. Remember that when you multiply by 10, you're getting a bigger number, and so you're going to move your decimal place one decimal place to the right. So the 93, there's a decimal after this 93 that we don't see, but if we're moving it one decimal place to the right, it's as if we're adding another zero, and that's 930. We can confirm that on our calculator. 93 times 10 is 930. And then similarly, if we're going to divide, we're getting smaller, and so we're going to move one decimal place to the left. And so that should take the decimal from after the 3 in between them and change it to 9.3. And so we can check that. 93 divided by 10 is 9.3. Now, in our next one, if we're going to multiply by 100, then we're going times 10 times 10, which is like going 2 decimal places to the right. We're getting bigger by 2 decimal places. And so you add a 0, and we get 2,500. Let's check that. 25 times 10. 25 times 100. And that gets us our 2 decimal places to 2,500. Similarly, if you're going to divide, you're getting smaller by 100, and so you're going to move 2 decimal places to the left. Oh, there they are. 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places, we should get 0.25. So 25 divided by 100 and gets us 0.25. Take a second to try these ones then. If you're going to multiply by 1,000, you're going to move 3 decimal places to the right. And if you're dividing by 1,000, you're going to move 3 decimal places to the left. All right, let's see how you did. If you're moving 3 decimal places to the right, you're going to add 3 zeros on that, and you're going to get 145,000. And if you're moving 3 decimal places to the left, your decimal place ends up going right in front, and it ends up being 0.145. Okay, so that's helpful because when we're converting in metrics, going from centimeters to millimeters or meters or kilometers, we need to be multiplying or dividing by 10, 100, 1,000, depending on how far we go. This is where in our second warm-up, we're reminding ourselves how to convert from millimeters to centimeters, and we're going to remind ourselves of the metric staircase. So remember, the bigger measurements are on the top and the smaller ones on the bottom. So as you go down the staircase, you need to multiply by 10 for every step that you go down. And as you go up, you need less of these. And so you're going to have to divide by 10 for every step that you go up. Here we're going from millimeters to centimeters. So I know I have 24 millimeters. So if I'm going millimeters to centimeters, I'm going up one step on the staircase, which means I'm going to divide by 10 just once. And dividing by 10, we just reminded ourselves, was to move the decimal place one spot to the left, and we get 2.4. Let's confirm that on our calculator. 24 divided by 10 is 1 decimal place to the left, and it is indeed 2.4. Now in this one, I know how many centimeters, and I want to know how many millimeters. Well, millimeters are smaller, so we're going to need more of them. And you see, going from centimeters down one step to millimeters, I'm going down. We're going to multiply by 10 this time. And so 7 times 10, we should see is 70, or moving 1 decimal place to the left. Again, confirming 7 times 10 is 70. Why don't you take a second to try these last two, and we'll come back and see how you did. All right, going from centimeters to millimeters, again, I'm going to multiply by 10. So I'm going to move the decimal place 1 decimal place to the right, and that becomes 94 millimeters. And 3 millimeters is small, and if you go up to centimeters, you're going to get smaller by dividing. So you move the decimal place 1 decimal place to the left, and it's 0.3 centimeters. So we're going to be using the metric staircase for the first half of this section 3.2 quite a bit. So we'll see it on there. Remember, if you wanted to have this metric staircase written someplace in the back of your workbook or someplace is going to be very, very useful when going converting. All right, so let's move ahead to the bottom of page 62. And it reminds us measuring and estimating metric lengths and conversions, what we're going to do today. The four most common metric units of length for metric for small things is millimeters and centimeters. These are the ones we see in our ruler. And for large measurements, we usually measure in meters and kilometers. So those are the most common ones. We don't see decameters or decimeters too often. All right. Next, it says there are 10 in one blank. So let's start with a small measurement. So 10 millimeters is in 1 centimeter. And you can see that on your calculator or your ruler. All those small little ticks are the 10 millimeters, and 10 of those make 1 centimeter. Now, if I take centimeters and I have 100 centimeters, then that gets me a meter stick. Okay, your ruler, if you have a normal long ruler, it's 30 centimeters, and just over 3 of those makes up a meter stick that you see on the in the classroom on the board on the chalkboard. 1,000 meters. Let's talk meters now. If you take 1,000 meters, then you get 1 kilometer. But you could also consider very small measurements. If you had 1,000 millimeters, you end up with a meter. And then there would be a whole lot of millimeters and kilometers, but we don't really make that comparison too often. All right, so these are the most common ones that we'll be using and going back and forth between centimeters and meters and kilometers and meters. And let's do that on page 63. So we're going to convert each of these measurements here using the metric staircase. So I've copied it again here so that we can see if we go down the staircase, we're going to times 10. If we're going to go up the staircase, we're going to divide by 10. So if I'm going centimeters to millimeters, we kind of did this in our warm-up. Centimeters to millimeters is down, so we're going to multiply by 10. So 6 times 10 is 60 millimeters. Here I'm going meters to centimeters. Okay, so there's my meters, and I have to go down 2 steps to get to centimeters. So I'm going to have to go times 10 times 10, which is like times 100. So I'm going to have to move my decimal place 2 decimal places to the right. Okay, and we did this in our warm-up too. So times 100 means 400 centimeters. Let's again confirm that one. 4 times 100 is indeed 400. And then now if I'm going to go to kilometers to meters, so there's kilometers way up here, and if I'm going to go down to meters, I need a whole lot of more meters to describe a kilometer. And 1, 2, 3 steps, so that's times 10 times 10 times 10, 10, 100, 1,000. I'm going to have to multiply by 1,000. And this is one of those what we just talked about. There's 1,000 meters in a kilometer, so 7 kilometers is going to be 7,000 meters. Now we have some decimals here. Half of centimeter or 0.5 centimeters going to millimeters. We're going to go down 1 step, so we're going to multiply by 10. It's going to move over here. Well, you know there's 10 centimeters in a millimeter, so half of it must be 5 centimeters, moving the decimal place 1 spot. Here I'm going from meters to centimeters, so I'm going to have to go down 2 spots. So down 1, 2 is going to move it to 50 centimeters. The other way you can think of it is there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So if you have 0.5 or half of it, then you must have half of 100, which is 50 centimeters. Here I'm going 500 meters to kilometers. This time I'm going up the staircase, so I need less kilometers to describe this unit. So I'm going up 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to divide by 1,000. So this one I'm going to check on my calculator. 500 divided by 1,000 is going to move our decimal place 3 decimal places to the left. 1, 2, 3, and it is indeed 0.5. 250 centimeters, so there's centimeters going up 2 spaces. So I'm going to divide by 100. It's going to move my decimal places 2 spots to the left. Or we can think about this. We know there's 100 centimeters in a meter. And so if I've got 200, that's 2 meters, and 50 more makes 2.5, a half of another meter, gets us 2.5 millimeters. And finally, 1,500 meters in kilometers. That's 1, 2, 3 decimal places up there. I'm going to move my decimal place 1, 2, 3. It looks like it's going to be 1.5. Or we can think of it as 1,000 meters is 1 kilometer, and another 500 would be half a kilometer. So that's 1.5 kilometers. Let's confirm that one on our calculator. 1,500 divided by 1,000 is 1.5 kilometers. Okay, good. So that's probably our most valuable question of this section, is being able to go back and forth between centimeters and kilometers or meters and so forth. Um, the last two are good estimation questions. So let's write the metric unit you may use to measure these. So if we're talking the diameter of a DVD or a Blu-ray disc or something like that, the diameter is how wide it is. And I could see that I was probably measuring something centimeters, maybe 10 centimeters wide. The length of a car, well, I don't think we're going to talk centimeters for that for a car. I think we'd be talking meters for that. Kilometers would be silly for the length of a car because it's so much smaller than a kilometer. Millimeters or centimeters, there'd be a lot. You might go to centimeters, but meters makes most sense to me. Let's look back at that DVD player, that disc. The thickness, so how thick it is, well, that's very, very thin, those things. So we're going to probably use our smallest measurement and go to millimeters. Distance to the moon. Now, some of you might say, how many miles to the moon? Well, miles is in imperial measurement. We're talking metric, so don't forget that. So we might talk kilometers. And then height. A lot of us talk, when we talk height, we talk about how high we are in feet, which again is a imperial measurement. You might say you're 5'11" or something like that. But if we're talking in metric, we would probably use meters or centimeters to describe that. I'm just under 2 meters tall, or about 190 centimeters tall. Okay, so you might talk in that. So if we're talking metric, we would use those measurements. All right, let's just finish off page 63. We have a hockey puck which has a diameter of 7.6 centimeters. How would we describe it in millimeters? Well, if we wanted to use the staircase, we could, or maybe we can just do this one without the staircase. We know that there is 10 millimeters in every centimeter, so there's 7 of those, so 70 at least, plus 0.6 more would get us 76. Or, of course, we're going from centimeters down to millimeters, so we times 10 and move the decimal place 1 decimal place to the right. Here we have a filing cabinet, which is 132 centimeters tall. We want it in meters, so that is going from centimeters to meters is going up 2, so we're going up 100. Means we're going to divide by 2 and move the decimal place 2 decimal places to the left to get 1.32 meters. And then it says, what's the height in meters and centimeters? So that's a nice way. We could say 1.32 meters in total, but the 1 meter, of course, is there, and the 0.32 would be the 32 extra centimeters left over. So we would say 1 meter, 32 centimeters as a way of combining it. All right, so we're going to stop there and finish the end of page 63. We'll finish page 64 and 65 in our next video. But I'd like you to move on to your quiz, and where you'll be mostly just converting from centimeters and meters and doing questions very similar to this. Okay, so make sure you remember to use your metric staircase when doing that. All right, best of luck.